My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 32 years old, and I just discovered that being the forgotten daughter in an American family can cost you far more than your dignity. Christmas morning started like every other holiday in the Mitchell household, with my sister Madison getting showered with expensive gifts while I received whatever was left over. But this year was different. This year, my parents handed her the keys to a $120,000 Porsche, while I got a $3 rose from the grocery store. Standing in that garage watching 20 relatives celebrate Madison like she was royalty, while completely ignoring my existence, something inside me finally snapped. What I uncovered next about my family's finances and a hidden inheritance would shock you, but what I did about it might surprise you even more. Have you ever wondered how far someone will go when they discover their entire life has been built on lies? Let me take you back to where it began. The garage door rolled up like a theater curtain, revealing the silver Porsche Macan S, gleaming under professional photography lights my father had rented for the occasion. I stood there, clutching a single red rose, watching my 28-year-old sister Madison shriek with joy as she discovered the red velvet bow stretched across the windshield of her $120,000 Christmas gift. This is how Christmas morning unfolded in the Mitchell family garage in Westfield, New Jersey. 20 relatives crowded around Madison as she bounced on her toes like a teenager, her perfectly manicured hands covering her mouth in staged surprise. My parents, Richard and Patricia, stood beaming with pride as Madison's iPhone captured every angle for her Instagram livestream. "Dad, Mom, I cannot believe this is real." Madison's voice carried that breathless quality she'd perfected for social media, the one that made her 55,000 followers feel like they were experiencing luxury alongside her. She ran her fingers along the pearl white leather interior while her phone screen filled with heart emojis and congratulatory messages. "Nothing but the best for our princess, Dad," said, his chest puffed out like he'd personally crafted the vehicle. "You deserve every bit of this success, sweetheart." Mom was already directing the photographer she'd hired to capture the moment. "Make sure you get the license plate we had made. It says Blessed One." "Isn't that perfect?" I looked down at my rose. The petals were already starting to wilt in the December cold that seeped through the open garage door. $3 from the grocery store floral section still bearing the price sticker I hadn't bothered to remove. The stem felt cheap and hollow between my fingers. "Sarah, come. Get in the photo," Mom called out, waving me over toward the car where Madison was posing with the keys. "We want the whole family in this shot." The livestream viewer count had climbed to over 2,000 people watching this orchestrated reveal. Comments flowed past faster than I could read them. Goals: "Your parents are amazing. Living the dream." Not a single person acknowledged my presence in the frame. Aunt Dorothy caught my eye from across the garage. She'd driven down from Princeton for Christmas morning, and her expression held a familiar mixture of sympathy and barely contained disapproval. She'd witnessed these family dynamics for decades, but this moment seemed to shock even her. The photographer snapped dozens of shots, while Madison gave a running commentary about the car's features. Heated seats, panoramic sunroof, premium sound system. She'd clearly researched every detail beforehand, though I suspected she'd known about the gift for weeks. These surprise reveals were always carefully choreographed productions in our family. My cousin Jake, from Mom's side, leaned over to his wife and whispered something I couldn't quite hear, but their uncomfortable glances in my direction made the meaning clear. Even the extended family recognized the stark disparity playing out in front of them. I thought back to my own 28th birthday 4 years earlier. Mom had made a sheet cake from a box mix, and we'd celebrated at the kitchen table with immediate family only. The gift was a gift card to Target for $50, presented in a reused gift bag from Madison's previous birthday party. Madison was now explaining to her online audience how grateful she was for such supportive, generous parents. "This is what unconditional love looks like, people. I'm so blessed to have family who believe in my dreams and want to see me succeed." The rose stem snapped in my hand. I'd been gripping it too tightly, and the break sent a sharp pain through my palm where a thorn had punctured the skin. A small drop of blood appeared on my finger, matching the deep red of the petals. "Oh, Sarah, don't be dramatic," Mom's voice cut through the garage noise as I stepped toward the door. "We're taking family photos with the car. This is Madison's special moment." The word dramatic hung in the air like an accusation. Dramatic for bleeding on a rose stem. Dramatic for standing quietly in the corner while my sister received a luxury vehicle. Dramatic for existing in a space that was clearly meant to showcase only one daughter. "I think I've seen enough," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The garage went quiet, except for the hum of the space heater Dad had set up for the photo shoot. 20 pairs of eyes turned toward me, including the 2,000 people watching the live stream. Madison's phone was still recording, capturing this moment of family tension for her carefully curated audience. "Sarah, what's wrong with you?" Patricia snapped, her smile faltering as she realized I was disrupting the perfect family narrative she'd spent the morning constructing. I dropped the rose onto the concrete garage floor. The petals scattered like confetti around my feet, creating a small circle of red against the gray surface. "Nothing's wrong, Mom. Merry Christmas." The walk to my Honda Civic felt longer than usual, every step echoing in the suddenly silent garage. I could feel their stares burning into my back, but for the first time in my 32 years, I didn't turn around to apologize or explain or make everything comfortable for everyone else. My car started on the third try, the engine coughing in the cold December air. Through the windshield, I could see the garage tableau frozen like a holiday painting. Madison stood beside her Porsche. My parents flanked her like proud sentries, and 20 relatives watched the Mitchell family Christmas drama unfold in real time. As I pulled out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of Aunt Dorothy in my rearview mirror. She was walking toward her own car, shaking her head with an expression I'd never seen before. It looked almost like she was proud of me for finally walking away. My downtown Westfield apartment felt smaller than usual when I walked through the door, still shaking from the garage confrontation. The silence was a relief after the chaos of Christmas morning, but it also amplified the questions racing through my mind. I needed answers, and I needed them documented. I pulled every photo album from my bedroom closet and spread them across my living room floor like evidence at a crime scene. What I discovered over the next 3 hours made my stomach turn. The pattern wasn't just obvious, it was methodical. Madison's Sweet 16 party at the Westfield Country Club had cost $15,000 according to the invoice I found tucked in Mom's photo album. The same year, my 13th birthday was celebrated with a $12 sheet cake from ShopRite and pizza delivery. I remembered asking for a small party with friends, and Mom saying the budget was too tight that year. I opened my laptop and created a spreadsheet with 2 columns. Sarah's gifts and Madison's gifts year by year, going back 15 years. The numbers were staggering. Madison's average annual gift value was $3,200. Mine was $45. Christmas 2018, Madison received a MacBook Pro designer handbags and a trip to Miami with friends. Total value approximately $4,000. I got a Target gift card for $50 and a book about teaching techniques. Christmas 2019, Madison's gifts included diamond earrings, a designer coat, and spa treatments totaling over $5,000. My gifts were a coffee mug that said "World's Okiest Teacher" and a grocery store gift card for $30. The evidence kept mounting as I dug deeper into family documents I'd never bothered to examine before. Madison's college expenses, all paid by our parents. Her Manhattan apartment rent, covered by Dad's monthly transfers of $2,800. Her car insurance, health insurance, cell phone bill, all handled by the family accounts. Meanwhile, I had $41,000 in student loans from my teaching degree at Rutgers. I paid my own rent, my own insurance, my own everything, on a $62,000 teacher's salary. When I'd asked Dad for help with my $500 car repair last spring, he said money was tight and they couldn't spare it. I found the credit card statements Mom had left in my grandmother's recipe box. The same month, Dad told me they couldn't help with my car. They spent $8,000 on Madison's birthday party at some trendy Manhattan restaurant. The receipt was itemized. Premium champagne Wagyu beef custom cake professional photographer. My hands were shaking as I calculated the totals. Over the past decade, my parents had spent approximately $380,000 supporting Madison's lifestyle. Their total financial contribution to my adult life was $4,800, and most of that was grudgingly given. But this wasn't really about money, was it? This was about worth. This was about love measured in dollars, and attention measured in Instagram posts, and value determined by who got the spotlight at family gatherings. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through Madison's social media accounts. Her bio read, "Blessed daughter, living my best life thanks to the most amazing family." Her recent posts showed designer outfits, expensive restaurants, luxury vacations, all funded by parents who supposedly loved their daughters equally. The family group chat had been buzzing since I left the garage. Madison posted photos of herself with the Porsche tagged at various Westfield locations, showing off her Christmas miracle. Mom shared the garage reveal video with crying, laughing emojis. Dad posted about how proud he was of his successful daughters, plural, though the photo only showed Madison. I scrolled back through months of family group messages. Every celebration, every achievement, every milestone revolved around Madison's life. When I got my master's degree, the family chat response was 3 thumbs up emojis. When Madison gained 1,000 Instagram followers, there were 17 congratulatory messages and plans for a celebration dinner. The New Year's dinner invitation had come through the group chat an hour ago. Patricia Mitchell had written dinner at the club on January 1st at 6 p.m. Dress code, cocktail attire. Can't wait to celebrate Madison's amazing year and hear about everyone's resolutions. I typed my response carefully. Sorry, I have other plans for New Year's. Hope you all have a nice time. The silence that followed was immediate and telling. No follow-up questions about what my plans were. No attempts to reschedule or include me in alternate arrangements. Just silence, as if my absence was expected and possibly preferred. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Jessica Park from Park & Associates Law Firm. I saw your inquiry about probate law consultation on our website. Would you be available for a phone consultation this week regarding estate matters?" I stared at the message for a long moment. Earlier that afternoon, in a moment of desperate curiosity, I had filled out a contact form on a law firm's website. The question that had been nagging at me since I started documenting the family's financial patterns was simple but potentially devastating. What exactly had happened to Grandma Rose's inheritance when she died in 2019? I typed back my response. Yes, I'm available this week. I need to understand what my legal rights are regarding a family estate that may not have been distributed according to the deceased's wishes. The consultation was scheduled for Tuesday at 9 a.m. 3 days to prepare my questions and gather whatever documentation I could find. 3 days to decide if I was ready to discover just how deep my family's deception might go. Jessica Park's law office in Morristown occupied the 3rd floor of a restored Victorian building, all dark wood paneling, and legal books that seemed to whisper about justice and consequences. I sat across from her mahogany desk on Tuesday morning, my hands folded around a manila folder containing everything I'd managed to gather about Grandma Rose's estate. "Miss Mitchell, I've reviewed the initial information you provided over the phone. Before we discuss your grandmother's will, I need to understand exactly what you were told about the inheritance distribution when she passed in 2019. I took a deep breath and recounted what I remembered. My parents said Grandma Rose had left everything to the family as a whole, that there wasn't much money anyway. Maybe $15,000 or $20,000 total. They said she wanted it used for family expenses and Madison's education." Jessica made notes on a yellow legal pad as I spoke. "Did you ever see the actual will document? Were you present for any meetings with the estate attorney or at the probate court?" "No, nothing like that." Dad handled everything. He said it was too complicated and emotional for us girls to deal with so soon after losing Grandma. Madison was starting her fashion blog that year, and I was finishing my master's degree, so we just trusted him to take care of the legal details. Jessica opened a thick file folder and pulled out several documents. I ran a preliminary search through the Union County probate court records yesterday. Your grandmother's estate was valued at $75,000, not $15,000 or $20,000 as you were told. The will explicitly states that the money should be divided equally between both granddaughters. The words hit me like a physical blow. $75,000. Split equally would have meant $37,500 each. That money could have paid off most of my student loans. It could have been the down payment on a house. It could have changed my entire financial situation. There's more. Jessica continued, sliding another document across the desk. The probate records show that your parents filed paperwork claiming you had waived your inheritance rights voluntarily. This document bears what appears to be your signature. I stared at the paper in front of me. The signature looked similar to mine, but I had never seen this document before in my life. I never signed anything. I didn't even know there was anything to sign. Jessica nodded grimly. This constitutes inheritance fraud, which is both a civil and criminal matter in New Jersey. The forged signature alone could result in felony charges against whoever created it. The entire $75,000 was deposited into an account controlled by your parents, then immediately transferred to what appears to be your sister's business account. My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory from our last conversation before she got sick. Sarah, I want you to know that I see how hard you work, how much you give to others. I'm going to make sure you're taken care of when I'm gone. Promise me you'll always know your worth. I thought she was just being sentimental. I never imagined she was trying to tell me about money she was leaving me. Jessica explained the legal process step by step. We would file a civil lawsuit for recovery of the full inheritance amount, plus interest and legal fees. The case was strong because probate fraud creates a clear paper trail, and the forged signature could be easily challenged through handwriting analysis. We would also need to report the criminal aspects to the Union County Prosecutor's Office. The retainer fee is $15,000, Jessica said. I understand that's a significant amount for a teacher's salary, but I can offer a contingency arrangement. We'll recover your legal fees from the defendants when we win the case. When we win, not if we win. Jessica's confidence was reassuring, but the reality of suing my own family felt overwhelming. These weren't just legal documents we were discussing. These were relationships, however damaged, that would be permanently destroyed by this action. There's something else you should know, Jessica said. Inheritance fraud cases often trigger automatic reviews by the IRS. If your parents failed to report the inheritance as taxable income or made large financial gifts without proper tax documentation, they could face federal tax evasion charges as well. The scope of consequences kept expanding. This wasn't just about recovering money that should have been mine. This was about exposing years of financial deception that could result in criminal charges for both my parents. I authorized Jessica to file the lawsuit and signed the contingency agreement. The paperwork would be completed within a week, and my parents would be served with legal documents shortly after. There would be no going back once this process started. On the drive back to Westfield, I called Aunt Dorothy. Her voice was gentle but unsurprised when I explained what Jessica had discovered. "Oh, honey," Dorothy said, "your grandmother talked to me about that will several times before she died. She was so worried about how your parents treated you. She specifically told me she was leaving money to both you girls equally because she wanted you to have some security. Did you know they never gave me any of it? I suspected something was wrong when you never mentioned receiving anything." Rose was very clear about her intentions. She loved you both, but she saw how differently your parents treated you. This inheritance was her way of trying to balance things out. The lawsuit would be filed on Monday. My parents would receive official notification that their 32-year-old daughter was challenging their financial decisions in court with potential criminal implications. There would be no family dinners, no holiday celebrations, no pretense of normal relationships after this. But there would also be justice for Grandma Rose, who had tried to protect me even after her death, and accountability for parents who had built their favoritism on lies and forged documents. Dr. Amanda Chen's office on Elm Street felt like a sanctuary, with its soft lighting and comfortable chairs that seemed designed to absorb years of family trauma. I sat clutching a tissue box, trying to explain to this stranger why I was suing my own parents, while simultaneously starting therapy for the first time in my life. Sarah, what you're describing is a textbook example of golden child versus scapegoat dynamics in dysfunctional families, Dr. Chen said gently. The financial disparity you've documented isn't just favoritism, it's a form of emotional and financial abuse that conditions you to accept less than you deserve. Her words gave me vocabulary for feelings I'd carried my entire life. I wasn't crazy for noticing the differences. I wasn't selfish for wanting equal treatment. I wasn't dramatic for feeling hurt by decades of systematic devaluation. Meanwhile, Jessica Park's investigation into the inheritance fraud uncovered evidence that made my stomach churn. The bank records showed the full $75,000 from Grandma Rose's estate had been deposited into a joint account controlled by my parents on the 15th of March 2019. Within 24 hours, the entire amount was transferred to Madison's business account to fund her fashion blog startup. The forged signature on the inheritance waiver document was so obviously fake that Jessica laughed when she showed it to a handwriting expert. Your parents weren't even careful about this fraud, Sarah. They clearly never expected you to question their version of events. At Lincoln High School, my newfound clarity about family dynamics translated into professional confidence I'd never experienced before. During faculty meetings, I stopped apologizing for my ideas before presenting them. When Principal Martinez suggested I apply for the Assistant Principal Development Program, I didn't immediately assume I wasn't qualified. Martinez pulled me aside after a particularly successful presentation about incorporating trauma-informed teaching practices into our curriculum. Sarah, I've noticed a change in your leadership style lately. You seem more confident, more willing to advocate for your ideas. What's different? I'm learning to value my own worth, instead of waiting for others to validate it, I told him honestly. The application for the Assistant Principal program required 3 professional references, a detailed essay about educational philosophy, and a presentation to the school board. 6 months ago, I would have convinced myself I wasn't ready for such responsibility. Now, I completed the application with careful attention to my qualifications and genuine excitement about the opportunity. My relationship with Michael Torres, the history teacher who'd been asking me out for coffee for 2 years, finally progressed beyond polite hallway conversations. When he invited me to hike the trails at Watching Reservation on Saturday morning, I said yes, without overthinking whether I was interesting enough or attractive enough for his attention. Michael's straightforward Midwestern perspective provided a refreshing contrast to my family's complicated dynamics. When I explained the inheritance lawsuit during our hike, his response was immediate and supportive. Sarah, what your parents did is theft. You don't owe them your silence or your forgiveness just because they're family. Family relationships should be built on respect and honesty, not manipulation and financial abuse. His validation meant more than he probably realized. For 32 years, I'd been told that questioning my family's treatment was ungrateful or dramatic. Michael's perspective helped me understand that healthy relationships don't require you to accept mistreatment to prove your love. Dr. Chen assigned homework between our sessions. I was supposed to practice setting boundaries in low-stakes situations and notice when I automatically apologized for existing. The exercise revealed how deeply I'd internalized the message that my needs were less important than everyone else's comfort. When the coffee shop barista gave me the wrong order, instead of apologizing and accepting it, I politely asked for the correct drink. When my neighbor asked me to cover her bus duty for the 3rd week in a row, I said no, without providing an elaborate excuse. Small victories that felt revolutionary after decades of people-pleasing. Jessica called on Thursday with an update that made my hands shake. The inheritance fraud lawsuit was officially filed, and my parents would be served with legal documents within 48 hours. She'd also discovered additional evidence of financial irregularities that could trigger an IRS investigation. Sarah, I need to prepare you for the possibility that this case will have consequences beyond recovering your inheritance. Your parents may face federal tax charges if they failed to report the inheritance as income or made large financial gifts without proper documentation. The scope of what I'd set in motion felt overwhelming. This had started as a quest for answers about Grandma Rose's will, but it was becoming a comprehensive investigation of my family's financial practices. Jessica assured me that we were simply following the legal evidence wherever it led, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to destroy whatever remained of my family relationships. My phone had been silent since I'd declined the New Year's dinner invitation. No follow-up texts asking about my plans, no attempts to include me in alternate celebrations, no acknowledgement that I might have my own life worth celebrating. The silence felt familiar and devastating at the same time. The lawsuit papers would be delivered to my parents' house on Monday morning. By Monday afternoon, they would know that their 32-year-old daughter had uncovered their financial deception and was demanding accountability through the legal system. There would be no going back after that moment. No pretending that everything was fine. No accepting crumbs of attention. No apologizing for taking up space in my own family. Madison's world started cracking on February 14th when Nordstrom's marketing team sent an email that made her hands shake. We're reassessing our brand partnerships in light of recent legal developments involving your family. We'll be pausing all sponsored content and affiliate relationships pending resolution of these matters. I watched from a distance as her carefully constructed influencer empire began to crumble. The inheritance lawsuit had become public record within days of filing, and Madison's followers weren't just passive consumers of lifestyle content. They were investigators, screenshot collectors, and gossip enthusiasts who loved nothing more than exposing fake wealth narratives. Her Instagram comment sections filled with questions she couldn't answer. Wait, your family is being sued for inheritance fraud. Is your blessed life built on stolen money? Screenshots of the court documents circulated in influencer gossip groups faster than Madison could delete and block the accounts sharing them. Sephora terminated their partnership, next followed by 3 jewelry brands that had been paying Madison thousands of dollars monthly for product placements. Her Valentine's Day post featuring a designer handbag she'd purchased on credit to maintain appearances received more hate comments than likes for the first time since she'd started her blog. The math was brutal and public. Madison's blessed and stylish brand had been generating $80,000 annually through sponsorships, affiliate commissions, and brand partnerships. Within 3 weeks of the lawsuit becoming known, that income dropped to $12,000 as companies distanced themselves from the scandal. Her follower count became a daily source of anxiety as the numbers dropped steadily. 55,000 to 48,000 to 41,000. Each lost follower represented potential income disappearing, and Madison's increasingly desperate posts trying to maintain her luxury lifestyle only made the situation worse. She started purchasing expensive items on credit cards just to photograph them for Instagram, then returning them after the posts went live. The designer dresses, luxury handbags, and jewelry featured in her content became elaborate theater productions funded by credit limits she was rapidly maxing out. I found myself checking her social media accounts, obsessively feeling a complicated mixture of satisfaction and guilt as I watched her public humiliation unfold. The sister who had received everything while I got nothing was finally experiencing consequences for the privilege she'd taken for granted. Her desperation showed in increasingly erratic posting schedules and obvious attempts to manufacture content that would recapture her audience's attention. She posted workout videos in designer athletic wear. She clearly couldn't afford any more restaurant reviews at expensive Manhattan establishments paid for with borrowed money and fashion hauls featuring items that would be returned. within the return policy window. The most damaging blow came when a popular influencer watchdog account called Fake Rich Lifestyle posted a detailed analysis of Madison's content alongside screenshots of the inheritance fraud lawsuit. The post went viral with over 200,000 views in 24 hours, exposing not just the legal issues, but also Madison's pattern of misrepresenting her family's wealth. Comments poured in from followers who had spent money trying to emulate Madison's lifestyle, buying products she'd recommended, and following financial advice from someone whose prosperity was built on stolen inheritance, money. The betrayal her audience felt was personal and vocal. Madison's brand partnerships weren't just business relationships, they were the foundation of her adult identity. Without the validation of major brands wanting to associate with her image, without the monthly income that had allowed her to live independently, without the social media influence that had made her feel important and successful, she was forced to confront who she actually was underneath the curated perfection. The credit card debt she'd accumulated trying to maintain her image during the scandal grew to $45,000 across 6 different cards. The minimum monthly payments alone consumed most of her remaining affiliate income, and she was forced to take a part-time job at a boutique in downtown Westfield for $15 an hour. The irony wasn't lost on me. Madison, who had never worked a traditional job in her adult life because family money had always been available, was now folding clothes and ringing up sales for customers who recognized her from social media and whispered about her family's legal troubles. Her Instagram bio changed from "blessed daughter living my best life thanks to the most amazing family" to "fashion enthusiast, sharing authentic style inspiration." The word authentic felt particularly hollow given the circumstances, but it represented Madison's attempt to rebrand herself as someone who had overcome adversity rather than someone whose adversity was entirely self-created through decades of entitlement. The family group chat, which had been silent since Christmas morning, suddenly came alive with frantic messages from Madison begging our parents to help with her mounting financial crisis. The responses revealed a family in complete financial freefall, with no safety net available for anyone. Her most recent post, a selfie in her boutique uniform with the caption, "Learning that real wealth comes from hard work and gratitude," received exactly 37 likes and comments questioning whether she'd learned anything at all from the inheritance scandal. The girl who had squealed over a $120,000 Porsche 6 weeks earlier was now asking her Instagram followers for recommendations on affordable skincare routines and budget-friendly meal planning tips. My confidence at Lincoln High School grew like a plant finally getting proper sunlight after years in the shadows. The Assistant Principal Development Program application felt like a natural next step rather than an impossible reach. Principal Martinez had been watching my leadership during faculty meetings, and his encouragement carried weight that my family's opinions never had. "Sarah, your presentation on trauma-informed teaching practices was exactly what our district needs," Martinez told me after I delivered a 40-minute workshop to the entire faculty. "Have you considered that your personal experiences might actually be your greatest professional asset?" The idea that my family trauma could be transformed into expertise that helped other people felt revolutionary. For the first time, I began to see my struggles as qualifications rather than weaknesses. My English classes flourished as I brought authentic emotion to discussions about characters who overcame adversity and found their voices. Students responded to the genuine passion in my teaching, and several wrote college application essays about resilience that reduced me to tears with their honesty and strength. The teachers' union representative, Karen Walsh, stopped by my classroom during lunch break with resources I hadn't known existed. "Sarah, we have counseling services and legal support available for educators dealing with family trauma. You don't have to handle this inheritance situation alone." The professional support network I'd never tapped into suddenly became visible. Colleagues shared their own stories of difficult families, toxic relationships, and legal battles that had shaped their understanding of resilience. I wasn't alone in having complicated family dynamics, and I wasn't weak for seeking legal recourse when family members committed fraud. Michael Torres and I had been spending Saturday mornings hiking the trails at Watching Reservation, where his straightforward perspective helped me process the emotional complexity of suing my own parents. His Midwestern values were refreshingly uncomplicated compared to my family's manipulative dynamics. "You know what I admire about you, Sarah," Michael said as we reached the summit overlooking the valley. "You're not trying to get revenge on your family. You're just demanding the respect and honesty that should have been there all along." His words helped me understand that seeking justice wasn't the same as seeking vengeance. I wasn't trying to hurt my parents out of spite. I was trying to recover what had been stolen from me and establish boundaries that protected my worth. Dr. Chen's therapy homework included practicing self-advocacy in low-stakes situations. When the coffee shop barista gave me regular coffee instead of the decaf I'd ordered, I politely asked for the correct drink instead of drinking what I was given. When my neighbor asked me to cover her morning bus duty for the 4th consecutive week, I said no without providing an elaborate justification. These small victories in boundary setting felt like revolutionary acts after 32 years of automatically putting everyone else's comfort before my own needs. The merit-based raise I received in March wasn't just additional money in my paycheck. It was objective recognition of professional competence that had nothing to do with family validation. Lincoln High School valued my contributions enough to invest in my continued growth, something my parents had never done. I began looking at apartments in better neighborhoods, imagining a living space that reflected my own taste rather than just the cheapest option available. The idea of having guests over without apologizing for my modest circumstances felt liberating. My phone remained silent from family communications, but the silence no longer felt punishing. Instead of wondering what I'd done wrong or how I could fix relationships that had never been healthy, I focused on building connections with people who appreciated my authentic self. The nomination for Westfield Teacher of the Year arrived in my email inbox the same week I learned that my parents' country club membership had been revoked due to the inheritance fraud scandal. The timing felt like cosmic justice, external validation of my worth arriving just as my family's social status collapsed under the weight of their own deception. My students had nominated me for the award, writing testimonials about how my teaching had helped them understand that their backgrounds didn't determine their futures, and that speaking up for themselves wasn't selfish, but necessary. Reading their words, I realized that I'd been modeling resilience and self-advocacy without even recognizing it. My professional life had become a space where I was valued, respected, and seen as competent, everything my family had never provided. The apartment I'd started saving for wasn't just about having better living space. It was about creating a home that belonged entirely to me, where my worth wasn't questioned and my needs weren't considered secondary to everyone else's comfort. Principal Martinez called me into his office on a Thursday afternoon with news that made my hands shake with excitement. The school board had approved my application for the Assistant Principal Development Program, and I would begin the certification process in the fall while maintaining my teaching responsibilities. "Sarah, your ability to overcome personal challenges while maintaining professional excellence is exactly the kind of leadership our students need to see. You've shown them that difficult circumstances don't define your potential." The professional recognition felt like sunlight after decades of shadows validation, that my worth had never been dependent on my family's ability to see it. The Westfield Country Club's emergency board meeting on March 8th lasted exactly 47 minutes, according to Aunt Dorothy, who heard the details from her friend Margaret on the membership committee. The Mitchell family name, which had opened doors in this community for over 2 decades, was now synonymous with inheritance fraud and financial deception. Dad's financial consulting business started hemorrhaging clients within days of the lawsuit becoming public knowledge. The irony was devastating and obvious. How could potential clients trust someone with their money when he had stolen from his own daughter's inheritance? 3 major clients terminated their relationships immediately, citing ethical concerns and fiduciary responsibility issues. The Westfield Country Club board voted unanimously to revoke our family's membership effective immediately. The decision was swift and merciless, with several board members privately expressing that they had always sensed something troubling about the family dynamics, but had never spoken up. Richard Mitchell no longer belonged to the 19th hole conversations about business deals and investment strategies. Patricia Mitchell could no longer attend the charity luncheons and fundraising committees that had defined her social identity for 15 years. The family's carefully constructed image as successful, generous community pillars collapsed in a matter of weeks. Mom's volunteer position at United Way became untenable when whispers followed her to every charity event. Board members began excluding her from planning meetings and decision-making conversations. Her 20 hours per week of unpaid community service, which had made her feel important and needed, disappeared as organizations quietly distanced themselves from the scandal. Street. Helen's Catholic Church, where Mom had served on the altar guild and Dad had been a regular usher, experienced its own social drama as parishioners took sides in the family conflict. Father McKenna suggested diplomatically that perhaps Mom should step back from visible leadership roles until the legal matters were resolved. I learned about these social consequences through Aunt Dorothy, who maintained her public support for me while serving as an informal intelligence network about the family's community isolation. The speed with which longtime friends and associates abandoned the Mitchell family was both shocking and predictable. Dad's attempts at damage control backfired spectacularly when he tried to explain the situation at his weekly Rotary Club meeting. His defensive monologue about ungrateful children and family disputes being blown out of proportion became the subject of town gossip within hours. Several members walked out during his presentation, and the club president asked him to consider taking a leave of absence. The local weekly newspaper, the Westfield Leader, published court notices that included details of inheritance fraud lawsuits in their legal announcements section. Seeing the Mitchell family name associated with fraud allegations in print made the scandal impossible to ignore or minimize. Neighbors who had exchanged pleasantries for years began avoiding Patricia at ShopRite, suddenly finding urgent business in different grocery aisles when they spotted her cart. The regular dinner invitations and social gatherings that had filled their calendar for decades mysteriously stopped coming. Their reputation destruction in a community like Westfield was swift and thorough once the trust was broken. In a town where everyone knew everyone else's business, the Mitchell family had become the cautionary tale that people whispered about at soccer games and PTA meetings. The country club that had never truly welcomed me anyway now stood as a symbol of the social consequences my parents faced for their financial deception. I drove past the gates sometimes, feeling a complex mixture of vindication and sadness for what my family had lost through their own choices. Dorothy called me with updates about the social fallout, her voice carrying decades of frustration about family dynamics she had witnessed but felt powerless to address. Your grandmother would be heartbroken about the legal situation, but she would be proud that you finally stood up for yourself, Sarah. The community consequences extended beyond social embarrassment. Dad's business referrals, which had always come through country club connections and church relationships, disappeared entirely. The network of trust and reputation he had spent 25 years building was destroyed by the inheritance fraud scandal. Mom's carefully maintained image as a devoted community volunteer and charitable family matriarch became a source of mockery rather than respect. Women who had once sought her advice about fundraising events now avoided her calls and excluded her from planning conversations. The speed of their social isolation was breathtaking. In less than 2 months, Richard and Patricia Mitchell went from being respected community members to being the family that people crossed the street to avoid encountering at the post office. Their financial advisor ironically recommended that they consider relocating to a community where the scandal wouldn't follow them. The suggestion that they might need to leave Westfield entirely to escape the reputation damage they had created felt like ultimate justice for 32 years of making me feel invisible in my own family. Jessica Park's phone call on April 3rd delivered news that made my coffee cup slip from my hands onto my kitchen floor. The IRS audit wasn't triggered by my inheritance lawsuit as I'd assumed. Federal investigators had been watching my father's business finances for over a year, due to suspicious patterns in his tax filings and client account management. The lawsuit simply accelerated their timeline and expanded the scope of their investigation. What they discovered painted a picture of financial deception that went far beyond stealing my grandmother's inheritance. Sarah, your parents are facing $28,000 in penalties and interest for gift tax evasion related to Madison's Porsche purchase alone, Jessica explained. But that's just the beginning. The audit revealed unreported income from your father's consulting business, improper business expense deductions, and potential bank fraud related to the car loan application. The numbers were staggering. Dad had inflated his annual income by nearly $50,000 on the loan documents for Madison's Porsche, claiming his business generated $230,000 yearly when his actual reported income was $180,000. The bank fraud implications could result in criminal charges beyond the civil penalties. Mom's part-time work at Century 21 real estate became their only reliable income source as Dad's business license faced suspension pending the federal investigation. The man who had built his reputation on managing other people's money was being investigated by the government for mismanaging his own family's finances and potentially defrauding financial institutions. The emotional complexity of watching my parents face serious legal consequences felt overwhelming. Part of me experienced vindication that their financial deception was being exposed by objective federal investigators. Another part of me grieved for the family relationships that were being destroyed by decades of lies and manipulation finally coming to light. Dr. Chen helped me process these conflicting emotions during our weekly therapy sessions. It's normal to feel both justice and sadness simultaneously when family dysfunction results in legal consequences, Sarah. Your parents' choices created these situations, not your decision to seek the inheritance that was rightfully yours. Madison's first direct contact with me in 3 months came through desperate text messages that arrived at midnight. Sarah, please help me understand if there's anything we can do to stop the federal investigation. Mom and Dad are talking about maybe going to jail, and I'm scared about what happens to our family. My response was measured but clear. I cannot and will not interfere with federal law enforcement, Madison. The IRS investigation was already underway before I filed my lawsuit. These consequences stem from Dad's business practices and financial decisions over many years, not from my seeking justice for Grandma Rose's inheritance. The reality that my parents had hired both a criminal defense attorney and a specialized tax attorney revealed the severity of their legal exposure. Legal fees were consuming their remaining liquid assets while their monthly expenses continued to mount without Dad's business income. Their family home mortgaged to nearly its current market value to fund the lifestyle that had supported Madison's influencer career faced potential foreclosure within 6 months. The house that had been the symbol of their success and the backdrop for countless social media posts showing their blessed family life was now at risk of being lost to the bank. Jessica called with a formal settlement offer from my parents' civil attorney. They're willing to pay the full $75,000 plus your legal fees, but they're refusing to admit any wrongdoing in the settlement agreement. They want this to appear as though they're generously resolving a family dispute rather than acknowledging inheritance fraud. The settlement offer felt like one final attempt to control the narrative and avoid accountability for their actions. Even facing potential criminal charges and financial ruin, my parents were still trying to position themselves as the generous family members graciously resolving a disagreement rather than acknowledging the fraud they had committed. I authorized Jessica to reject the settlement offer unless it included full acknowledgement of the inheritance fraud and a written apology for the decades of financial and emotional manipulation. If they wanted to resolve the civil case without a trial, they would need to take responsibility for their actions rather than continuing to gaslight me about what had happened. The federal investigation continued regardless of our civil case resolution. The IRS doesn't drop audits because families reach private settlements about related fraud allegations. My parents' tax problems were now separate from my inheritance recovery, with potentially more serious criminal implications than the civil lawsuit had ever posed. April ended with the devastating news that Dad's business license had been suspended indefinitely pending resolution of the federal tax case. Richard Mitchell Financial Consulting, the practice he'd built over 25 years, was effectively finished whether or not criminal charges were ultimately filed. Madison looked different when she walked into the Summit coffee shop on May 15th. Gone were the designer clothes and perfectly applied makeup that had been her signature look for years. Instead, she wore a simple Target sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail that spoke of someone who no longer had time for elaborate styling routines. Working retail at $15 an hour had given my 28-year-old sister her first real understanding of what financial stress felt like. The boutique job in downtown Westfield was a humbling experience for someone who had never punched a time clock or worried about covering basic expenses. "Sarah, I need to talk to you about everything that's happened," Madison said, sliding into the booth across from me. Her voice carried a vulnerability I hadn't heard since we were children. "I've been thinking about our family for months, and I finally understand how wrong everything has been. The transformation wasn't just physical." Madison's entire demeanor had changed from the entitled confidence she'd displayed at Christmas to something approaching genuine humility. The loss of her influencer income and social media status had stripped away layers of artificial persona, revealing someone I barely recognized. "I discovered something horrible last week," she continued, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup for warmth or comfort. "Remember how Mom and Dad always told me my college fund was safely invested for my future? I found out they spent that money years ago on maintaining our lifestyle and just kept lying about having it." The revelation didn't surprise me, but seeing Madison's shock at discovering parental deception gave me a glimpse of how differently our family experience had been. She had been protected from the harsh realities of their financial manipulation because she was the beneficiary, not the victim. Madison apologized for specific incidents I remembered with painful clarity, not defending me during family arguments when Dad would criticize my career choices or Mom would dismiss my achievements, accepting expensive gifts while I was ignored during birthdays and holidays, perpetuating the social media narrative that portrayed our family as loving and generous, when the reality was systematic favoritism and emotional neglect. "I'm starting to understand that I was damaged by their treatment too, just in a different way," Madison said. "They made me entitled and unrealistic about money and work. I thought I deserved luxury without effort because that's what they taught me. I never learned to be independent or self-sufficient because they always rescued me." The conversation revealed that Madison had been questioning the family dynamics since losing her sponsorship deals, particularly after Instagram followers started commenting about the obvious favoritism in our Christmas morning posts. Seeing the inheritance fraud case through outsiders' eyes had forced her to confront uncomfortable truths about privilege she had taken for granted. She provided crucial information about our parents' true financial situation that even Jessica Park hadn't uncovered. They were facing bankruptcy. Within 6 months, the house would likely be foreclosed by August, and they had been hiding the severity of their problems for over a year to maintain appearances. Madison also revealed that Dad had inflated his income on the Porsche loan application by nearly $50,000, making the bank fraud charges more serious than I had realized. The car purchase that had been the symbol of Madison's privilege was also evidence of Dad's willingness to commit federal crimes to maintain the family's image. The most shocking revelation was that Madison had $45,000 in credit card debt accumulated during her desperate attempts to maintain her influencer lifestyle while her income disappeared. She was drowning financially and emotionally, finally understanding what it felt like to struggle without family support. "I want to help with your lawsuit," Sarah Madison said. "I'll provide testimony about how the inheritance money was used for my blog startup and how Mom and Dad lied to both of us about Grandma Rose's intentions. I know it won't fix everything I did wrong, but I want to support you for once." The offer to support my legal case represented a complete reversal of our lifelong dynamic. Madison was choosing honesty and justice over family loyalty and self-preservation. She was willing to testify against our parents despite knowing it would destroy any possibility of future financial support. We made tentative plans to build a genuine relationship based on equality rather than the competitive dynamics our parents had created. Madison suggested monthly lunch meetings where we could talk honestly about rebuilding trust and establishing healthy boundaries. The conversation was interrupted by a call from Aunt Dorothy, reporting that Dad had been admitted to Overlook Medical Center with chest pains and elevated blood pressure. The stress of the federal investigation and impending bankruptcy had apparently taken a physical toll. Madison and I looked at each other across the table, both recognizing that we were about to face a family crisis that would test our fragile new alliance. The question was whether we could maintain our commitment to honesty and mutual support when confronted with parental medical emergencies and emotional manipulation. We decided to visit the hospital together, presenting a united front for the first time in our adult lives. Madison's hand shook as she gathered her purse and jacket, but her voice was steady when she said we needed to stand by each other, regardless of what emotional tactics our parents might use. The cardiac unit at Overlook Medical Center buzzed with the controlled urgency of monitors beeping and nurses making rounds. Dad lay propped up in the hospital bed, connected to an EKG machine that tracked his elevated heart rate, while Mom maintained her vigil in the bedside chair she had claimed for the past 18 hours. Walking into that room with Madison beside me felt like entering a battlefield where the weapons were guilt manipulation and decades of established family roles. Mom's face transformed the moment she saw us together, her expression shifting from relief at Madison's arrival to fury at my presence. "How dare you show your face here after what you've done to this family, Mom?" hissed, rising from her chair with the energy of someone who had been storing up rage for months. "Your father is in the hospital because of the stress you've caused with your selfish lawsuit. You're killing him, Sarah." Dad's voice was weak, but his message was familiar. "Sarah, I need you to drop this legal nonsense. The stress is affecting my heart, and we can't afford the legal fees anymore. We're going to lose everything because you couldn't just accept that families sometimes handle money differently." The manipulation was so predictable it almost felt scripted. "Create a medical emergency, blame me for causing it, demand that I sacrifice my needs to solve their problems." The pattern had played out in smaller ways throughout my childhood, but this was the ultimate version of their emotional blackmail. "This isn't about money, Dad. This is about 32 years of treating Madison like she mattered and treating me like I was invisible. It's about forging my signature on legal documents and stealing inheritance that Grandma Rose specifically wanted me to have." Madison's presence as my ally clearly shocked Mom, who had expected her golden child to remain loyal, regardless of the evidence of fraud and favoritism. The family dynamic she had orchestrated for decades was crumbling as Madison chose honesty over enabling. "Mom, what they did to Sarah was wrong," Madison said quietly but firmly. "I've seen the bank records and the forged documents. I know about the inheritance fraud, and I know how differently you've always treated us. This isn't Sarah being dramatic or ungrateful. This is Sarah finally demanding the respect she should have gotten all along." The medical crisis felt genuine but convenient. Dad's chest pains had started the morning after he received notice that his business license suspension would become permanent. The timing suggested that facing consequences for his financial deception had triggered stress-related health problems. Patricia's response revealed the depth of her inability to accept responsibility for their situation. She cast herself and Dad as victims of my ingratitude, rather than acknowledging that their legal troubles stemmed from decades of financial manipulation and fraud. "You're destroying this family over money that your grandmother left to help all of us," Mom said, her voice rising to a level that brought a nurse to check on the commotion. "Rose never intended for you to use that inheritance to hire lawyers and attack your own parents." I pulled out my phone and read directly from the copy of Grandma Rose's will that Jessica had provided. "To my granddaughters, Sarah and Madison Mitchell, I leave my estate to be divided equally between them, as they are both precious to me and deserving of security and independence." The words hung in the hospital room like evidence presented in court. Dad's monitors showed his heart rate spiking as the direct quote from his mother's will contradicted everything they had told us about her intentions. Madison's voice was steady when she spoke. "Mom, I was there when you told us Grandma Rose left everything to the family, and there wasn't much money anyway. You lied to both of us about the will, and you forged Sarah's signature on legal documents. These aren't family disagreements, these are crimes." The conversation reached its breaking point when I delivered the ultimatum that Dr. Chen had helped me prepare. "You can accept responsibility for the inheritance fraud, acknowledge the decades of favoritism and emotional manipulation, and work toward making genuine amends. Or you can continue to cast yourselves as victims while Sarah and I build our own relationship based on honesty and mutual respect." Dad's response from his hospital bed revealed everything about his character. He asked me to drop the lawsuit because it was affecting his health, with no acknowledgement of how his treatment had affected my emotional and financial well-being for 3 decades. Even facing potential criminal charges, he remained focused entirely on his own comfort. "The federal investigation will continue regardless of what I do about the civil lawsuit," I explained. "The IRS doesn't drop audits because families reach private settlements. Your tax problems and business license issues are consequences of your own financial decisions over many years." Mom's final attempt at emotional manipulation involved reminding me of family loyalty and suggesting that my legal action was destroying relationships that could never be repaired. The irony was breathtaking. She was asking me to prioritize family unity while refusing to acknowledge the behavior that had damaged our family for decades. Madison and I left the hospital room together after making it clear that reconciliation required acknowledgement and changed behavior, not just our forgiveness of their continued refusal to take responsibility. Walking through the hospital parking lot, I realized that the confrontation had been necessary but not healing. My parents remained committed to their narrative of victimhood, unable or unwilling to understand that respect and accountability were prerequisites for any healthy family relationship. The warehouse in Edison, where bank auctions take place, felt like a graveyard for broken dreams, filled with repossessed vehicles that represented someone's financial collapse. Madison's silver Porsche Macan S sat in row 3 between a BMW and a Mercedes, all gleaming under fluorescent lights that made the whole scene feel surreal. 8 months had passed since Christmas morning when I watched Madison squeal over the keys to the same car. Now I stood with the registration paperwork in my hand, having used $75,000 from my settled inheritance lawsuit and $15,000 from my teaching savings to qualify for bidding. Michael Torres stood beside me for moral support, his steady presence helping calm the nerves that had been building since I made the decision to attend this auction. The irony was perfect and painful. The car that had symbolized my family's disregard for my worth was available because their financial deception had finally caught up with them. About 50 people wandered through the warehouse, examining vehicles, a mixture of dealers looking for inventory and individuals hoping to find bargains on luxury cars with complicated histories. I felt like an imposter among them, a high school teacher who was about to bid on a car worth more than my annual salary. The Porsche looked exactly as it had on Christmas morning, with the pearl white leather interior and premium sound system that Madison had described so enthusiastically during her Instagram livestream. She had maintained it perfectly, despite her other financial problems, and the odometer showed only 8,000 miles. The auctioneer's voice carried across the warehouse as bidding began on vehicles in numerical order. Madison's Porsche was lot number 47, giving me time to second-guess my decision and wonder if this was revenge disguised as justice or simply reclaiming power that had been taken from me. Lot 47 is a 2024 Porsche Macan S, silver exterior, white leather interior, original MSRP $120,000. Bidding opens at $58,000. My hand shook slightly as I raised my paddle for the opening bid. 3 other bidders showed immediate interest, including a woman in a business suit who looked like she bought luxury cars regularly. The price climbed quickly past $60,000, then $65,000. The bidding slowed as we approached $70,000. I was competing against 2 remaining bidders, my heart pounding as I remembered holding that wilting rose while Madison posed with these same keys. This wasn't just about buying a car. This was about reclaiming a piece of dignity that had been stolen from me. $72,000 from Paddle 23, the auctioneer called out, looking directly at me. Do I hear 75? The silence stretched for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. The other bidders had reached their limits, and the car that had cost my parents their financial stability was about to become mine for $48,000 less than they had paid. Sold to Paddle 23 for $72,000. Driving the Porsche off the auction lot felt like stepping into an alternate reality, where I was the daughter who mattered, who deserved luxury and consideration. The leather seats adjusted perfectly to my height, the steering wheel felt solid in my hands, and the engine responded with the smooth power that justified the original price tag. Michael followed me in his Honda. As I drove through Madison toward the highway, both of us, probably wondering if this purchase was healing or just expensive therapy. The car handled beautifully, but the emotional weight of owning something that had once represented my family's disregard felt complicated. The drive through Westfield took me past landmarks of my family's former status, the country club that had revoked their membership with its perfectly manicured golf course visible through the gates, the church where Mom had been quietly asked to step back from leadership roles, the house where I had spent Christmas morning watching Madison receive everything while I got nothing. My parents' house now displayed a foreclosure notice that made the neighborhood gossip obvious. The Mitchell family's fall from grace was public and complete, documented in legal filings and auction records that anyone could access. The parking space at my apartment complex seemed too small for a luxury SUV, but the Porsche fit perfectly between the modest sedans and hatchbacks that belonged to other teachers and young professionals. Looking at it from my living room window, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and uncertainty about what this purchase meant. I took a single photograph of the car keys in my hand, the Porsche logo catching the afternoon sunlight. My social media post was simple and direct. Dreams come true when you work for them. No mention of family drama or legal battles, just a quiet statement that spoke to anyone who had witnessed my Christmas morning humiliation. The response was immediate and supportive. Colleagues from school, friends from college, even former students who followed my rarely updated social media accounts offered congratulations and praise for my success. Not one comment asked how a teacher could afford such a car, because they knew about my inheritance lawsuit and understood that justice had finally been served. Madison texted me that evening. I saw your post about the Porsche. I'm happy that something good came from all this mess. You deserve to have nice things, and I'm sorry it took me so long to understand that. The text felt like closure on the Christmas morning that had started this entire journey toward accountability and self-respect. 12 months after Christmas morning, I stood in the kitchen of my 3-bedroom townhouse in Westfield, preparing dinner for the people who had become my chosen family. The pressed rose from that devastating holiday sat framed on my mantel, transformed from a symbol of humiliation into a reminder of the moment I chose self-respect over family approval. My promotion to assistant principal at Lincoln High School had become official in September, along with a salary increase that made the townhouse purchase possible without stretching my budget. The professional recognition felt like validation from an objective source that had nothing to do with family dynamics or legal battles. Madison arrived first, carrying a bottle of mid-priced wine and a potted plant for my new kitchen windowsill. Her transformation over the past year had been remarkable. Working as a personal stylist and fashion consultant, she was building a career based on actual skills rather than social media influence funded by family money. We've come a long way from Christmas morning, Madison said, helping me arrange plates around the dining room table I had chosen myself. I never thanked you properly for forcing all of us to face the truth about our family. It was painful, but it was necessary. Michael Torres brought flowers and his steady presence that had anchored me through the most difficult months of legal battles and emotional upheaval. Our relationship had developed into genuine partnership, built on equality and mutual support. Nothing like the conditional love I had experienced growing up. Dr. Amanda Chen accepted my invitation to join us, bringing professional insight that had helped transform my understanding of family trauma into tools for helping other people. Her therapy guidance had been crucial in maintaining my emotional stability while navigating federal investigations and civil lawsuits. Aunt Dorothy completed our small gathering, her longtime support finally acknowledged and celebrated in a space where honesty was valued over family loyalty. She had risked relationships with other family members by supporting my legal action, but her moral courage had provided crucial validation during the darkest moments. The legal resolutions had created comprehensive accountability for decades of financial and emotional manipulation. My parents paid $75,000 for the inheritance plus $18,000 in legal fees and court costs. The federal tax case resulted in $28,000 in penalties, but cooperation with authorities helped them avoid criminal prosecution. Dad now works as a part-time bookkeeper, earning $35,000 annually after his financial advisor license was permanently revoked. Mom found full-time work as a dental office manager, and they moved to a modest apartment in Cranford after losing their house to foreclosure. The social consequences in Westfield had been swift and permanent. Madison's rebuilding process included establishing genuine social media content based on realistic lifestyle choices rather than fabricated wealth. Her follower count stabilized at 18,000 supporters who appreciated her honest content about learning financial responsibility and rebuilding after privilege loss. Over dinner, we talked about the year's lessons and the relationships we were building, based on authenticity rather than manipulation. The conversation felt natural and supportive in ways that family dinners had never been, with everyone contributing equally and no one's voice being diminished or dismissed. My work at Lincoln High School had expanded beyond teaching English to include developing programs that help students recognize and address family trauma. The New Jersey State Teacher Achievement Award I received in November acknowledged both my classroom excellence and my advocacy for students from dysfunctional families. The presentation I was preparing for the Regional Education Conference focused on helping educators identify signs of emotional abuse and favoritism in students' home environments. My personal experience had become professional expertise that could benefit other people facing similar family dynamics. The townhouse represented more than improved living conditions. It was physical proof that I could build a life based on my own values and achievements, surrounded by people who appreciated my authentic self, rather than demanding that I minimize my needs to accommodate their comfort. As our dinner guests prepared to leave, Madison hugged me goodbye with genuine affection that felt nothing like the obligatory family interactions of our childhood. Our monthly lunch meetings had become opportunities to build sisterly connection based on mutual respect rather than competitive dynamics created by parental favoritism. Standing in my kitchen after everyone left, I reflected on the complexity of the past year. Grief for family relationships that couldn't be saved, satisfaction in achieving justice for decades of manipulation, and hope for the future I was creating on my own terms. The final scene of this journey took place at the Education Conference podium, where I stood confidently sharing insights with fellow educators about recognizing family trauma in students. My presentation emphasized the importance of providing stable, supportive environments for children whose home lives might not value them appropriately. Sometimes the greatest lesson we can teach our students is that their worth isn't determined by how others treat them, but by how they choose to treat themselves. When family fails to see your value, it's not a reflection of your worth. It's an opportunity to build the life you deserve. If this story resonates with your own experience, know that you're not alone. Resources for family trauma, legal guidance, and emotional support are available through counseling services, legal aid organizations, and support groups in every community. Your feelings are valid, your worth is inherent, and you deserve relationships built on respect and equality. Share this story if it helped you understand that it's never too late to choose yourself and demand the treatment you deserve.